My name is Paul Rapino. I'm working with Jonathan, as he said, and this is a fantastic opportunity to listen to some really great thought leaders. I wish we had an hour or an hour and a half after lunch just sitting around a table, drinking some coffee and talking. I've gotten to know most of these gentlemen, and it's been a fantastic discussion. So my background is enterprise sales and biz dev. The last 5 years it's been blockchain-related startups. So I got a good round of kind of what's really happening in the space. And I want to go deeper. And Howard did a great job on an overview of what enterprise can do, and so did Paige in the group earlier. Today I want to take it a little deeper on a topic that, if you're taking notes, Gartner says it's one of the top 4 initiatives that we should be thinking about with how blockchain is going to change business. So our panel today, we're going to be discussing record management. Exciting topic, it sounds like, but take it a step deeper. What does that actually mean? And what are the use cases and what are the capabilities of what blockchain could do in this space? So I'm going to go down the panel. I'll start with Cappy. If you could introduce yourself a little bit and one quick sentence about what you do, and then talk about your thoughts on record management.
Cappy Atawa, I was on earlier, so I'm guessing everybody knows who I am. I'm with Samsung SDS. I think the thing that we find most often customers are talking to us about record management is chain of custody of data. And that's a bit that I'd like to spend a bit of time talking about today.
Robert?
Hi, my name is Robert. So I'm a founder and a CEO of our block. We are a blockchain company in town. So what we do is we are building actually a blockchain building framework and components to help the customers to quickly build up their blockchain or decentralized apps. So far we have a few real clients, and we found it's very interesting that quite a few clients, what they really need is how to put the data record on the blockchain. And so I think this is a perfect panel to discuss this, and I will be able to share probably a few real customer cases with you if we dig that down.
Thank you, Robert.
My name is Setrak Khoshafian. I am the Chief Evangelist and Vice President of Business Process Management at Pegasus Systems. I've been focusing on digital process automation for the past 15 years, and more recently on blockchain, which in terms of record management is extremely applicable when you look at the orchestration involving processes, especially across enterprise boundaries.
Thank you, David.
I'm David Kruger. I'm with Axio Corporation. We're a new cryptographic technology that basically is an extension to the blockchain that allows the control of data when it's off-chain.
Thank you. Okay, so I want to ask a few questions here, and then if you start thinking of questions yourself, we'll be taking some questions here in a little bit. Setrak, why is blockchain better for record management than just a regular database?
So in order to answer that, we have to really elevate the perspective of blockchain to what is called value chain. And what I mean by value chain is, and I'm going to give several examples. You heard supply chain as a sort of a poster child example, a very good use case for blockchain. Recently we did a partnership. I forgot to thank Cappy as well as Jonathan and Paul to get me here. And we worked on, interestingly, a warranty value chain. What is a value chain? So you have let's say you submit a warranty claim, you have a beginning, you have an end, and you go through various milestones and you orchestrate the work involving people, business partners, enterprise applications. And you realize as you're doing this value chain, you need a consistent view of, for example, the device or the car. Well, you need a record. You need a consistent view of the transactions across these enterprises. You need a consistent view of the suppliers and the supplier provisioning. So it becomes very clear that record management can become a very empowering enabler for end-to-end value chains.
Cappy, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that's really sensitive and that is part of the evolution of the maturity of the industry, is that people still, when we talk about record management, the system of record today is whatever legacy they have, whether it's SAP or Oracle or whichever one. And one of the reasons that we went with Pega is that Pega is really a strong mechanism where the two worlds can actually come together. And so when you talk about record management, I think you have to think about it in the context of the people who have to apply it and how you maintain sanity as you transition or evolve from the old kind of system in terms of record management and the new one. And this is where I think we need to have a lot more collaboration that currently exists between blockchain platforms and traditional technologies.
Thank you. So earlier, Rachel and Paige discussed this whole supply chain and the endpoint, the touch points, and then governance was brought up. Robert, can you talk a little bit about how you see governance in the data exchange of value?
Yeah, so in our case, because what we do is actually we're doing some kind of pretty low-level technical frameworks. So when we talk to our customers, especially for the enterprise customers, we usually is kind of less interesting. We kind of move everything down to code and down to how actually we're going to implement. From this point of view, for example, I think one of the biggest value for blockchain can bring is so-called public verifiable. I want to highlight the verifiable. For any of those business data, for the data record, any business data, to be able to verify it is true, right? It is not kind of changed, it's not forged. It's really important. In the past days, in the very old past days, when we do the record management, it's probably on the paper, and then eventually to move to the database, people kind of lean to trust whatever put on the database, whatever put on the data, it might be true, right? It might be anything put on the government, it might be true. But this is not the case. More and more people realize this is the problem. How do we trust those data when there's multiple people, multiple enterprise or enterprise to the government, how to ensure it is true, right? So blockchain is actually kicking to solve this problem. From some point of view, I think blockchain is not actually a replacement for the database, but not a replacement for the old data management system. It's actually an addition. It's just to make the database, make the data record management system better. It's more verifiable.
Okay, thank you. So when I try to make it real simple, so I look at like 20 years ago, it was the Internet of Information, right? The Internet came along and it wowed us all. Those that are old enough, others of you grew up and it just was there. But this idea of information at your fingertips. The last 5 years or so, the Internet of Things, so things being connected. And we talked a few minutes ago about the value chain of the Internet of Value. So David, I have a question for you, and it has to do with security. So in those 3 levels, why is security more important on this kind of next level of data record management?
Well, I mean, you said it well. In the internet, it was first all about having access to information, but one of the largest problems that we face now is that we can get all the information we want, but we don't know if we can trust it. If we share information, we don't necessarily know where it goes. And that's created kind of a global crisis that's a lack of trust. So where security comes in, and I would put security and control in the same context, you really have to do 2 things if you want to solve these problems. You need to have trust, which the blockchain provides, but you also need to have security, which I would just say in shorthand is just making sure that people aren't accessing, people that should have access to your data don't. But further than that, once you grant access to people, because of the mobility the internet brings, you also have to control where it goes after you share it. And those are really 3 things that you have to do, and blockchain and other technologies all have a role to play in that. And I think we're at a sort of a tipping point here where worldwide people are tired of their data being stolen or abused, or in the case of what Sony Music did in this last example, people's intellectual property be stolen. I mean, it's easy to steal, and I think we're just at this inflection point where the world's kind of saying, no more, we got to figure this out. And blockchain is a huge part of that.
Got it. I'm going to open this question up to the group. When I talk to people, they say, why, again, I started out with this, but I want to go deeper and kind of get all of you to respond. Why is blockchain for data better than just a regular database? Give me a simple answer on why I should take it seriously.
You want me to go first? Yeah, sure. So one is the security aspect we're talking about today. It's so much harder to break in. But the other one I find people are beginning to understand a lot more is the fact that any record that you can make is instantaneously available across the entire network. Whereas today it involves a lot of human intervention to get to data that you need if you have the right to get it. And very often that translates into personal relationships because you call somebody who you know who has access to the data and gets you the data. Whereas with the blockchain, it's instantaneous. Everybody who needs to know knows at the same time as everybody else.
Robert?
In the blockchain world, I think there's something say, don't trust, verify. Right? You don't need to trust something, you verify it. With the blockchain technology, you can verify quite a few things instantly, and then you know you can trust or not, right? For the old database world, you have to trust it. Sometimes you have to blindly trust the government, blindly trust the bank, blindly trust whatever the database returns to you. But for the blockchain, the benefit is it returns you some data, don't trust it, instantly verify it. You can quickly get the verification to know if you should trust that or not. I think this is a big step forward. So that's why I think the blockchain, for the serious data management, this is a big step forward from the database.
Before Satrag answers, if you have any questions, please step forward. We're going to get to questions in a little bit. Satrag?
Yeah, I totally agree. In fact, I spend a lot of time with enterprises on their digital transformation journeys, and one of the big problems they have, almost invariably, is master data management and master policy management. A consistent, trusted version of truth about a customer, about a product, about a supplier. Now imagine the same problem when you're going across enterprise boundaries. It's much more complicated. So all these, my colleagues explained them very elegantly. The trust and security problems become very relevant. You want to have a single version of the truth. Consider it or think about it as a transactional master data across enterprises. That's why it's different, because of its characteristics.
Okay, David, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'll just adding to the sort of the trust model here. You're not. It's not just verification. It's what we call composite trust. It's being able to have a global picture of who, what, when, where, how data is used that the blockchain enables. And if you lose any of those components, you lose trust. If you have all of them, then you can sleep well at night.
How do you determine what information should be on the blockchain in terms of the records versus what should be off? Because we can't just put every touch point onto the blockchain. So, Robert, any thoughts on that?
I think a common misinterception of put the data on the blockchain, you're thinking blockchain is a replacement of database or a new kind of database. Actually, it's not. It's better not to put, blockchain is not designed for you to put all those big data, a lot of data into the blockchain. And also blockchain, usually it is public. It is at least public for any of those nodes. That basically means if you have some data, once you put it on a blockchain, that everybody in that blockchain can see it, right? That is usually not the case. So put the data on the blockchain usually means is actually you have some kind of a verification data you put on the blockchain, but you still keep your data probably in the old way in the data, database system, your data lake, file system. That's still the same. So that's why I always say that put the data on blockchain is just actually additional. Is a step forward, not a replacement.
Okay. Let's talk about security one more time, David. What are the big changes that are going to come as we go into like 5G and other technologies that are going to push blockchain even further? What kind of things do we need to think about security-wise?
Oh gosh, do you have a smaller question? Again, it's a risk of sounding overly simplistic. At its core, all security problems are the same problem. All data governance problems are the same problem. They're the ability to be able to control your data through its life cycle wherever it is. And all of these technologies have a role to play with it, a role to play in that. And maybe the best way to answer your question is to have everybody begin to ask that question. no matter what kind of use case I'm looking for, 5G or some other type of use case, how is my data, how am I going to be able to control it, to have its use be visible throughout its life cycle, right? And that's a proper way of looking at security, I think, to ask that question first, rather than just trying to glom solutions onto parts of the problem. I mean, we have a $100 billion a year cybersecurity industry that doesn't do a very good job. And maybe that's why, because we're not building in that control from the get-go, and that's partially or largely what the blockchain enables, that control and verifiability from the moment that data is created until the moment it ceases to exist is an absolute necessary to actually achieve security.
So let's take security a little deeper. So when you look at ROI, a return on this work that's going to be done using blockchain or new technology, besides revenue or cost savings, what are some other things you think about when it comes to a return on investment of going into a blockchain security or a blockchain record management? Cappy?
One thing that I think people can relate to, because you all probably drive cars, is warranty management in the context of liability. One thing that blockchain and all the security things we've been talking about is doing is this changing people's thought processes. So you may have heard of the Takata airbag situation and lots of other safety-related issues that happen now. Takata happens not to be a software problem, but there have been software-related issues that have come up. And car companies are now thinking about using the blockchain to validate that the person they sent the message to get the car fixed have actually received the message. Today, more than 40% of the cars, if they're over like 5 or 6 years old, they don't even know if the letter they've sent to you to go and get the problem fixed ever even got to you. So it's going to change the way we think about it. So it's about verifying, but also getting a response back to say, yep, I got it. And if you don't respond, then there's a different course of action. So they want to be absolved of liability. So just one example.
So Troy, we talked at lunch a little bit about customer support and how that dynamic changes when you have a different record of information in the blockchain. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's so I want to build up upon what Cappy said because it really affects the customer, the warranty. And by the way, there is material on this. There is a white paper in the blockchain society. It's good to write white papers. There is a white paper. There is a solution which is about 2 months old now, yeah. Right? On the warranty value chain. It is very important to approach this, and I've seen this in other industries like Internet of Things. There was a hype cycle, right? And it's only now that sort of IoT is becoming more and more popular. And there were a lot of IoT conferences. In fact, there was a joke at one point, how do people make money in IoT? Through organizing IoT conferences. And so that's how it was in terms of the hype cycle. And there are lessons learned there because IoT started very much focusing on the bottom-up technology. So when you approach this top-down, that's why this warranty is very interesting because you register the product, then you have the claims processing, then you might involve field service, you might, if it's a car, you have the dealer, and then you have the customer, and then maybe even the supplier. The overall consistency and the speed of the process for the customer experience becomes very, very good. It really improves the customer. Things do not fall through the cracks, so as to say. The error rate, this is one thing we didn't discuss. The error rate with blockchain technology, because you have a single version of the truth, reduces. Because you know where to go and see the transaction, or if you have registered the product, all this information. The result is that you always impact the customer experience, and you can measure it through techniques like Net Promoter Score, etc.
Got it. Anybody else want to comment on?
I want to add a little bit, because actually both my fellow panelists mentioned about the car industry, and actually we have an important customer in China, is Capital Car. They're one of the largest car manufacturer in China. They've already become our customers. So what they really do is actually they try to use the blockchain to exchange the data between different parties, especially the insurance companies and the other parties who are for the dealership. So one important thing for a typical use case for the blockchain shared data record is basically there are multiple parties. They all want to share the single copy of the truth. However, they do not want to share everything, right? They need to, the data record is there. It is verifiable. It is a single copy of the truth, but it's only be shared when it is necessary. Only shared across the party that is necessary to access it, right? Blockchain is actually pretty good for this. Is basically you build up this blockchain, you let the people join this group, and then you have the full control. Who have the access? Whoever access it is basically like audit log and also the access control. So this is also kind of an additional important part adding to.
Very good.
David, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, there's one thing I would add to that. It's not just access. I mean, this is a sort of a chronic problem in thinking through the security cycle, through the life cycle of data. It's fantastic to have access control, but you have to extend past that, because once somebody has, say, a decrypted copy of a file or a readout from a database or something like that, right? Once that's in their possession, if you lose control of it, you know what happens? You lose control of it. Right? So this has to extend through the data life cycle for the promise of blockchain to be fully realized, in my opinion.
But
Cappy.
if I may, one important aspect related to what you just said is that most of the problems that we find today are in a post-event audit. And one of the great opportunities with blockchain is to preempt these kind of situations.
Absolutely.
And
Great
I
point,
think that's
yeah.
an important point to think about.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to wrap up our session, and we want, let's see, who should I pick on for a question to the audience? I will suggest that, are you guys all going to be here through the happy hour, or are you going to be leaving soon?
I have to
All right, well, grab them as soon as you can and pick their brains, because I had some great fun just getting to know each of them. Heard David at a conference a couple weeks ago, and was just floored by their knowledge of the industry. So anyway, Satrag, what's a question you want to ask the audience to think about?
So on your journey, adopting blockchain for yourself or the enterprises you're targeting in your customer base, how do you prioritize systematically, quantitatively, and qualitatively the low-hanging fruits? If you don't know the answer, that's
With that, we still have time? Oh, we still have time. Okay. Any questions from the audience? Supply chain, record management, blockchain-related questions?
I think you ended on a high note. Oh, go. Hey, look, I'm bringing it to you.
Okay. Just
All right, Kylie.
Just
Haley.
a quick question. So I don't know if you guys are the right ones to answer this, but I'm curious, do you ever think blockchain will help build trust in our voting process, not just in the US, but even Russia, for instance, like Putin always gets voted in by some ridiculous rate. So where will the impact of blockchain come into voting?
I think absolutely. I think from the technical point of view, it's absolutely blockchain can make the voting process more transparent and less fraud, and it's definitely. I think the technology is already there, right? It's just about the politics, about the politicians, right?
Yeah, I believe next conference we're going to go deep on politics, because I think there are some opportunities to discuss that. So with that, Cappy, thank you. Robert, Satrag, and David, thank you for joining our panel. And again, take some time to get to meet these gentlemen.
Awesome. Thank you. Good round of applause.